Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for this panel, this presentation by Binogi, where they're going to be presenting some amazing things. My name is Brian Willett. I work in the Anglophony School District. I'm also the host of My Creative Classroom podcast, and Catherine Connors, who is on this panel here today, was on the podcast earlier this year. So head over and check out our conversation about how Binogi can help educators and education support and transform learning. So I'm going to take some time to introduce who we have on the call today. I'm going to start off with Emmanuel Lepichon-Vorsman. Emmanuel is assistant professor at the University of Toronto, Institute for Studies in Education, and head of the Centre de Recherche en Éducation Franco-Ontarienne. Her research focuses on issues related to multilingual education, particularly on the education of students with a minority background. She is the co-founder of the Language Friendly School. Emmanuel just published a report on the future of language education in Europe, case studies of innovative practices. With us today, we also have Gustav. Gustav was born in Luxembourg and grew up in Stockholm, Sweden. He studied media production and film in high school. In 2011, Gustav started Binogi, a Swedish edtech company with the goal to help all students, regardless of background, all around the world. His love in education is through the stream media. Gustav is Benogi's Chief Operating Officer. With us today, we also have Gary Stairs, Benogi's product owner. Gary Stairs is a founder of several industry award-winning New Brunswick technology companies which develop leading-edge video games and e-learning platforms for social good. He is a former member of DFAIT's National Education Marketing Roundtable, a governor of iCanada, and former chair of the Canadian E-Learning Enterprise Alliance and iAtlantic. As well, Gary served as an inaugural board member of Tele-Education New Brunswick, in addition to various roles as a director and board chair of renowned Goose Lane Editions publishers. He is a Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal recipient for outstanding contributions to Canada's IT community and a global solution supplier to Daimler AG, Mercedes-Benz, and UN peacekeeping. His national and international partnerships, for example, with Heidelberg Mobile of Germany and Sweden's Binogi, groundbreaking apps, for example, and New Brunswick Nature Trust, and advocacy have raised New Brunswick's profile in exporting e-learning and mobile technologies. He currently lives in the quiet seaside village of Blue Rocks, Nova Scotia, where he's raising a rambunctious border collie puppy. We also have on the call with us today Catherine Connors. Catherine enjoyed a rich and rewarding 32-year teaching career with the Toronto Catholic District School Board. She has over 20 years of classroom experience as a secondary school teacher, as well as 10 years in the curriculum leadership portfolio. This portfolio included providing professional learning opportunities for teachers K-12 and principals focused on literacy, pedagogy, and assessment practices for multi-language learners. In June 2019, Catherine retired from the TCDSB and returned to her home in Nova Scotia. In her retirement, she has embarked on a new and exciting career with Benogi, a Swedish edtech company which has recently expanded to Canada with an office in Halifax. I'd like to now hand it over to Gary Stairs.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone from Blue Rocks, Nova Scotia, which is really not in my background. As you can see, I'm on another planet, or it seems like I'm on another planet. I'll just check in here and start sharing screen. Perfect. So this afternoon, I have a fun opportunity in front of me. I have the chance to talk to you about the future of education in our region and some ideas or initial thoughts about how you might future-proof your school with Binogi. And I'm pleased to do this, partly because I've been in the sector for a while, but also because I think we are at a very important juncture in our society as a result of the recent pandemic, for the ongoing pandemic. So that's my perspective today. It's a snapshot of where we are now and looking over the next hill to see where we might be going. So my topics today are briefly in 15 minutes. I'm going to share a few slides on the global perspective, going to talk about what I've seen or what we've seen in COVID-19 as the whole educational system is forced into a pivot, take a quick look out the next 10 years to see what some of those alternative scenarios of the future will look like, and then give you some quick insights into how foresight and futures research can help us think some of these important conversations through. And finally, of course, it's my opportunity to introduce and set up for Gustav Hard, who is with us today from Stockholm. So there's really three things here, I think, that we need to look at when we are thinking about the global education market. And you'll note this slide is a very commercial slide. I don't think we can segregate commercial activity and social change and the existing school systems without looking at all of them together through one lens rather than 3 or 4 lenses. So over the next decade, we're looking at probably 350 million post-secondary graduates and more than 800 million K-12 graduates than today. Of course, as you might expect, both Asia and Africa are the driving forces behind that. One of the groups that I work with in terms of industry analysts is a company called Holon IQ. And what they're saying from an economic point of view is this market could hit $10 trillion by 2030 as things continue to change at an unprecedented rate in terms of reskilling and upskilling. So right now, the Holland people are saying that the world needs 1.5 million teachers per year on average, approaching 100 million in order to keep pace. If you talk to the folks at UNESCO, they're calling for 69 million new teachers for both primary and secondary education by 2030. The biggest need right now is sub-Saharan Africa, which by 2030 should require 17 million primary and secondary teachers. So in certain countries such as Syria and Iraq have had their entire educational infrastructures destroyed in recent time with impacts on other countries in those particular vicinities. So really, it's been very interesting to think about the work that we are now doing here at Benogi, looking forward. Gustav will speak to this more, but basically Benogi is approximately 10 years old, and we're now looking at what does Benogi look like in 10 more years, and what do the school systems in Atlantic Canada look like in 10 more years. So basically, what has happened in recent months, the past 6 months, was completely from a shocks point of view. It has been an unprecedented time for our economies, for education, and our society overall, particularly since the middle of March up until the current time. In fact, here we are in Atlantic Canada in our respective bubbles at this point. Those bubbles will open up at the middle of July, and things will move forward, hopefully, so that we can begin to regroup as the Atlantic Canadian region. So UNESCO indicated that at the peak of the school closures in the past 3 months, there are basically 1.6 billion affected learners globally. 90% of all the total learners in the world were out of school, 90%. And 191 countries actually closed their entire educational systems. And in Canada, 6.6 million out of school in this period of time as well. So when you stop and you think about it, it's really like the biggest storm day we've ever known. It's a storm day. And it's not one day, it's not 1 week, 1 month. It's probably going to be a couple of seasons at least in terms of volatility and closures and reopenings and all of that stuff. So one of the things that we've been doing in our company is basically monitoring the respective jurisdictions to see what's exactly going on, to see from our point of view, from a commercial point of view, how can we support the teachers and school kids and parents and families in this period of time by partly keeping an eye on the systems and looking at how those systems are actually responding. Give you an example in terms of the first phase. Take the second point there. We saw in New Brunswick early on into the closure, getting computing devices and internet hotspots to families. In Nova Scotia, in sort of the second phase of response, we saw the Department of Education there publishing both continuity of learning plans on the one hand and making use of traditional media, salt wire, to send paper packages to all school children in Nova Scotia, which in itself was quite interesting. British Columbia did something comparable in that respect, and they partnered with a couple of media companies, notably one called Shaw, and then a digital learning company as well. So we've seen a lot of new collaborations that have not existed before, and these some of them may endure, others may simply serve us at this particular juncture of change. So I'd like to think that where we are at in the month of June here is that we're basically seeing a number of education departments regrouping after these interim solutions, planning ahead for the fall educational season. And then, of course, where I hope we're going to go in all this stuff is looking further ahead beyond the fall of 2020 into the new calendar year. So when we actually took a look at some of the various studies out there on digital instructional materials, here are some of the things that we actually learned, and really quite surprising. Not surprising, these materials are being increasingly used for teachers, are increasingly prominent. So that means a shift, right, from I was going to call it the newsprint, but from the book and the old school curriculum to digital media to supplementary materials of a digital nature, and guess what, also open educational resources that may or may not be aligned perfectly with the curriculum. There was a study recently, last year actually, in the US by a company called the Rand Corporation. And they found this. They found that 95% of elementary teachers and 97% of secondary teachers have reported using Google to plan instruction, and more than half of both elementary and secondary teachers report consulting Pinterest, Times TES, which is the Times Educational Supplement, and Teachers Pay Teachers, as well as various education department websites, both in the US and elsewhere. So the American Teacher Panel, organized by the Rand Corporation, demonstrated the use of both standards-aligned and content-specific websites has dramatically increased over the past several years, and that was even further accelerated this year. So the use of learning tools, whether they're websites or their apps or their online resources, in fact, is pervasive. Educators believe that digital learning tools have significant value, and we believe that many teachers would like to use digital learning tools more often. However, and here's the the barrier. Teachers are lacking information about the quality of these materials and their effectiveness. This information is especially necessary because evidence suggests that teachers do seek supplementary materials, including those found online, to fill gaps in comprehensive curriculum materials. And we'll hear some more about the gap analysis that Oisy will be doing with us when Dr. Lepichon Vorstman speaks a little later at the end of the panel. So over to the next slide. So looking into the fall, we could land on any one of these four quadrants. From the brick to click point of view, so we go back to school in early September, and then bang, we get hit with the second wave in Canada. And so there we go, from the brick back to the click, right back to distance learning and digital learning. The second scenario is one where we go from click to brick. So in this case, what we're seeing is the school district begins online for some reason, because maybe that outbreak took place in August, and then back to the schools whenever it's determined to be safe. One of the things that I've noticed with some satisfaction in New Brunswick, that province, our province, has been a leader in terms of COVID response on both a national and international basis. We've managed that very well, with only one small exception, of course, in the north. And then the third possibility is one where we have the blended learning model. And this could be hybrid. And that's what I'm actually seeing a bit and hearing a bit right now, as the various education ministers and premiers begin to announce the school opening plans for the fall. So a hybrid approach, depending on the grade level, depending on the subject matter, and of course the digital resources and capabilities of those different school systems. And finally, and here's a very draconian situation, one where we are resorting to entirely online learning when schools are all unsafe. And so we're using remote instruction, programming, and support to do that, which puts, as you can imagine, puts a tremendous pressure and burden on our teachers and our children in the educational system. So I'd like to quickly share a few perspectives from us at binogi.ca. And Brian has mentioned this and spoke of this very well in the introductions. So we've got different perspectives here. One of the perspectives is that our company is based around four specific pillars. And so when Gustav speaks in the next panel, he'll talk about the evolution of our product over time, both from a substantive or content point of view and from a technological advance point of view or evolution. Then, of course, what we are doing right now as we speak is we are also pursuing funding and investment so that we can make a significant contribution to education in Canada. And we've been so far quite successful and innovative in doing that. And our business model, in fact, is a partnership model that will open those doors even further. What we are also doing in Halifax, Nova Scotia, is we are involved in designing a Canadian project, thinking about an Atlantic Canadian project of some kind, and also localizing and packaging Benogi's many videos and many quiz questions for use in the Canadian educational jurisdictions and curricula. And last and certainly not least is the fact that Benogi itself is a research-driven and values-driven company. And I've got to say, as a newcomer to the company, it's really very, very strong on both of those, on the research front and on the values front. And here's an illustrative example, I think. And, you know, clearly, if you look in the bottom right-hand quadrant, the catchphrase for Benogi is education for all from day one. So what we are concerned about, our primary big hairy question there, is how do we help attain these UN Sustainable Development Goals, notably number 4, which is all about inclusive, equitable, and quality education for all by 2030. But I might add, it's my belief at least that these other 3 quadrants are also embedded and imbued in the values of Benogi. And so there are content areas around each of those 3. And I was recently very surprised and pleased to see how much material is available both on climate change and blue economy stuff. So from an alignment point of view, these are the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN to the year 2030. So from that point of view, being aligned with those particular principles and themes, we think we in our own right are helping schools be more future facing and future ready going forward. So that's the perspective that I've taken, at least. Hopefully others on the panel today will be in some agreement with those. One of the things that we've done in the past, I've done in the past, is to be involved in a process that's called Science and Technology Policy Foresight. It sounds like an awful big expression. In fact, it's basically looking over the next hill to see what might meet us and greet us there. So it's not like futures per se, because a futures approach will say, okay, this is what Atlantic Canada will look like in 2030. Whereas this particular foresight process says, well, you know, here we are in 2020, and if we take, let's say, a group of people, let's say we set up a session here with this Atlantic Education Summit, which is fabulous, absolutely fabulous, and congrats to the organizers, Dr. Chiasson and Mr. Willett in particular for leading this. But we could maybe next year have a foresight process for the summit, which would be kind of fun. So as we go down through these different blocks and steps in the foresight process, one begins by basically framing the question to say, okay, what is it in fact that we want to address? And, you know, the proposition could be that we want to address the future of education in Atlantic Canada in the year 2030. In order to do that, we have to make certain assumptions about both the present and the future. And then once we've made those assumptions, we do environmental scanning. We look out there and we say, okay. And so at the environmental scanning level, there are three things that we watch out for. The first thing is we watch out for what are called strategic trends. So where is it going overall at this point in time? And can we see that trajectory or that path continue? So that's kind of business as usual, but evolving. The second perspective here on the scanning side is looking at what we call critical drivers and uncertainties. So a critical driver might be the availability of funds for education departments, teachers' salaries, curriculum reform, or any of those things. In New Brunswick recently, they did both a 10-year English and a 10-year French strategic plan. So certainly some thinking there around these particular topics. So the critical drivers and the uncertainties. But the final thing is something that we're experiencing right now, and that is called a shock. COVID-19 pandemic is a shock to the system, to educators, and to all of us, really. So those are the three things that you look at. Once the scanning is done, then you can begin to map the political, economic, and social landscape to see what are the other factors that help determine that context. Then you select the drivers that you see most impactful and most influential in bringing about that change. The identification and application of those drivers in turn lets you select a certain number of scenarios. In my experience, it's 3 is an absolute minimum, and if you have many more than 4 or 5, it gets very difficult to evolve those and mature those. So the idea behind the scenarios is to say, well, you know, here are 5 or 3 different things that Atlantic Canada schools and education could look like in the year 2030. Of these scenarios, which one is the one that we favor, and which one is the one that we're the most optimistic about achieving in that particular period of time? So it's a selection of 3 to 5 scenarios, choosing one, and then going back in time to 2025 to say, okay, what did we have to do? What do we have to do in 2025, and what did we start in 2020? So you're moving back to get forward again to the future, and then publishing your documentation or your results. So that is a very quick, superficial overview of the foresight. The important thing here is that it's dynamic, it's fluid, and each step takes you along a better understanding of the system. And you gather a whole lot of information and build the building blocks. So that's kind of a quick view of that. Now, the folks at this analyst company called Hall and IQ, they are doing 4 different drivers that I'll just touch on quickly. And those 4 drivers are here. So listing those drivers, the first one is that education as usual, scenario number 1. So we continue to go on the path that we've known historically. Government continues to be the core source of funding, and away we go. The second one would be a regional rising scenario. Let's say there was one Atlantic Canadian education department by 2030. Well, that's a radical one, but you know, conceivable and possible, especially with the duality in English and French. The third scenario is one where there are gigantic companies, and I'm not talking about just little ones like Pearson and Nelson, but others that take dominant and influential roles there. The fourth one is a peer-to-peer scenario where both jurisdictions and pedagogy are involved in human-to-human, jurisdiction-to-jurisdiction involvement. And then the fifth scenario is one that's very much dominated by artificial intelligence and all of that stuff. So you can see on this particular slide that Hall and IQ is actually, if you go and Google Hall and IQ and education in 2030, you'll get the full detail on each of these different scenarios. So I've taken you through this pretty fast here today, and both apologize and also let you know that I have been severely edited back in terms of my content today. Here's some of the sources that we've consulted in creating this particular deck. I encourage you to look at any and all. And if there are any questions, just reach out to us. And over to my good colleague, Gustav.
Thank you so much, Gary, and great presentation so far. So I will just share my screen here so you can see my presentation. Okay, so I will tell you a little bit about the project Binogi that we've been running since 2011, where me and my 2 friends started in Stockholm, Sweden. And throughout this project, we have been in love of testing stuff really in details with students. So we are a video producing company where we want to record every lesson in school on film to make a digital version to help students all around the world with different needs. And throughout the process, we've done small tests on our videos, and you can see the progress here. So we started on with whiteboards, and then we added some pictures on the whiteboard, and we started off with green screen, and now we go full on animations. And we've realized that a lot of things is important when testing out videos. So one short example is that in every 34 seconds of a video, something exciting has to happen. And imagine if you as a teacher were in the classroom and every 34 seconds you have to make something really fun with the students. That will be really hard. But in a video, we can sit and measure each little thing in the video to make this happen and to keep the focus of students for 3 to 5 minutes, which is the length of our videos. And throughout this process into 2011, we have animated over 1,000 videos, and we've also done 16,000 quiz questions so that we can test out these students and see what they've learned and what we've missed in our videos. And to help all students, as many students as possible, we've done this in 13 different languages to cover each student's need. And the cool thing is that we've just passed over 1 million students that we've helped throughout this process, and we're super excited about that. And when we're looking forward, 10 years forward, obviously we want to help a lot more students than this, but we've needed this time to come up with the perfect formula for making great videos for the students. So when we are talking about future proofing with Binogi and Binogi CA, we want to help every student in the world and to make them feel the smartest in their class. And we want each student to feel smartest. And if we look 10 years forward and look at the classroom, we think that we will have the same opportunities with different students. So you will have the English language learners, and you will have the native English speakers, and you will have students with dyslexia and ADHD, and you will have those gifted students that always want to grasp for more, and you will have a lot of other different types of students. And we want, for looking 10 years forward, we don't want to see these students as one class. We want to see each and every student in detail and help each student wherever they are and what help they need in their terms of study. So if we look into deeper, what we want to do is that we want to make quizzes that self-adapt. And with that said, we want to be able to make a quiz. For an example, if a quiz has too much text in it, and we can measure and see that it takes too long for a student to read that text, then we will not give that more question that has that much text in it. And we will have self-adapting videos where the video speed and the length will adapt depending on which type of student it is. And we will have smart assignment that fits each student individually. So you as a teacher, you don't give out a homework or an assignment to one class. You give out one assignment for each student, depending on what needs they have. And we will have in-classroom lessons that are tailored for each situation, where we can measure the need of each student in that class. So we can create automatic slideshows for those teachers that need this, and to have keywords popping up on your whiteboard, depending on what keywords you're mentioning and what keywords the class has been struggled with throughout the year. And that was a really, really short presentation of what Benogi has been and what we think Benogi would be. And you can go to Benogi CA and check it out if you want to. And I will leave off now for Catherine, that will take this further. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gustav. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We believe that Benogi can be the ultimate digital STEM resource for teachers and students in grades 6 to 9. The reason we believe this is because it is a multilingual resource. There is mobile availability. It's not just a website, but there is an app that is being developed and tested. We have worked very hard and continue to work with curriculum alignment, ensuring that what is available in terms of our STEM resources in particular right now is in alignment with the curriculum within the province. And of course, we are research-based. So everything that happens is based on research and informed by research. And I know Emmanuel will speak to you about some of that research that is coming up. The Benogi family is rich, and it is diverse, and it is expanding all the time. We believe that students will in fact see themselves represented in some of the characters that are part of our videos. We've added recently some of our characters. We see here Akila, and we see Michael, and each story, each character has a family tree, has a background. And all of this is used when scripts are developed and videos are developed, as we see the characters themselves develop moving forward. The diversity of our characters is really important because we want students to be able to see themselves. Already today, we've heard mentioned equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we believe that Benogi is a tool that addresses many of these concerns, if not all of them. In particular, for students who are new to a school, new to a country, and are learning the language of that school, we know that students are placed age appropriate, so they could be in grade 8 and they are taking math and science, even though they might not have the fluency of that dominant language, let's say, for example, English. Access for subject-specific content then is provided for students with Binogi. We have access to content in a variety of languages, and the videos provide opportunity to scaffold learning for students, in particular language learners, with the engaging videos and the animations, which are far more engaging than a static picture in a textbook. We have language input in both the student's first language as well as English, or could be in French. And there is audio input through the oral and the written subtitles. So we've scaffolded quite nicely for language learners. Benogi uses a multilingual approach, and this is so important when we have growing populations of students in schools coming from a variety of countries speaking a variety of languages. The approach is an asset-based lens where we're looking at a mother tongue as a resource. And we use language then to scaffold for learning and conceptual development moving forward. New concepts then can be taught in a familiar language while students continue to develop their fluency in their first language, which we know is so important for students moving forward. I know earlier Gary mentioned the catchphrase, education for all from day one, and Benogi is a tool that provides that opportunity for students. Also thinking about the concerns regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion, which are so important in our schools right now and in our world in particular, Benogi promotes an inclusive learning environment by allowing students to access the resources and the supports that they need within the classroom environment. And Benogi is not just intended for language learners. Benogi is intended for all learners. You have probably heard the expression necessary for some, but good for all, and that is indeed the case with a resource like Benogi. There are multiple entry points for learners, and Benogi breaks down barriers, providing access to content and learning opportunities for students. As Gustav mentioned, lessons can be targeted and individualized, so we can address the specific learning needs of an individual student. We hope, we believe that all of this will strengthen student self-esteem and confidence. Students will see themselves, they will see their language equally valued to the dominant language within the school. And as I've already mentioned, students can continue to develop their first language, their home language, while they are learning a new language, while also they are learning the content, in particular math and science. Benogi, we also believe, encourages parental involvement, especially with newcomer families where parents at home perhaps don't also speak the language of the school. Now a parent has access to that math and science content in their first language. They can become more involved in providing support and help with their children at home. They might be more interested then in coming out to parent information nights, maybe even focused on Benogi, and we have seen this happen in a school last year in Toronto. There are many possibilities for using Benogi. In a traditional classroom, Benogi might be used as a whole class, where a teacher shares a video concept to introduce a new lesson, a new idea, a new topic. We might also see Benogi being used with partners or small groups. Certainly it can be used for independent work as well. We've heard a lot of talk in recent years about the flipped classroom. Benogi lends itself quite nicely as well to a flipped classroom model where students are viewing content prior to coming to class. And then with remote teaching and learning, we have certainly seen a lot more users on Benogi.ca and Benogi in Europe as well, and in our other markets. So for remote teaching and learning, Benogi has been a very useful tool, in particular with math and science in Canada. We hear a lot of teachers talking about diagnostic assessments and trying to determine what their students already know about a topic. And so for assessment for learning, Benogi is a great way to activate prior knowledge and to find out where my starting point, my teaching point should be on a particular concept. Certainly, there's also the combined review available. There's rehearsal and practice, and independent study is always available. What's also nice about Benogi, because we're saying that there is math, science, there's math and science content available, there could be clustering of curriculum expectations looking at a cross-curricular or a subject integrated approach. The curriculum connections piece is multi-layered. We have a very sophisticated textbook mapping system, a software system that has been designed, but not only are we using mapping of textbooks, we're also looking at and using curriculum expectations. We appreciate and understand the importance of curriculum expectations and making sure that what is available in terms of content supports the curriculum that is being taught in schools. We are looking at alignment not just within a province, but also across provinces and countries, regions. And we're seeing that there are some very common elements within math and science in particular. We also access input from curriculum experts around the world. So all of this works to support what we are doing and what we are developing so that we're able to identify if there are gaps, where the gaps are, and what needs to happen next in terms of content development. Most importantly, Benogi works with its users to maintain a positive feedback loop. We want to create an educational tool that is a living platform, a living document, so that it is refined constantly, it is improved regularly. We engage in ongoing research to inform our next steps, and we rely heavily on user feedback and teacher feedback. This is essential for us in terms of developing our product. We would invite you to consider participating with us in a pilot project. It would be a 3-year goal-oriented engagement. With Benogi, in a pilot, you would have access to Benogi's platform, Math and Science in Canada, for students and teachers, grades 6 to 9. There would be a committed implementation and support team available. There would be regular statistic reports available, online user support and webinars, and always ongoing research. This is a really important part of what we do and how we inform what we need to do next to make sure that the product is very effective. Mentioned already is a research paper that Emmanuel, who was on our panel today, was spearheading, released very recently, and last week I believe there was a webinar that happened. Lots and lots of people in Europe who attended and were listening to and learning more about Benogi, known as Studi in Europe. And with her, of course, was Dr. Jim Cummins, also of OISE. So there is already research to support what is happening with Benogi and more research coming up moving forward. I'm very aware of our time constraint right now, and so I'm going to wrap up and pass over to Emmanuel, but I would suggest that if you are interested in learning more about Benogi and engaging with us, please contact us. Myself, Gary, and Aaron are in the Halifax office, and we would be more than happy to share with you more information about a pilot project or engaging in learning with us. Emmanuel.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. I'm going to share my screen. Yes, I guess it's working. Can you see my screen? Yeah, it is working? Okay, great.
Yes.
Fantastic. So, hello everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Je suis heureuse d'être là aujourd'hui. Nous avions annoncé une présentation bilingue, donc les diapos seront en anglais, mais je peux parler en français si vous voulez. Donc, faites-moi savoir parce que je suis contente de pouvoir intervenir en français si nécessaire. Comme je partage, je ne vois pas vos messages, mais n'hésitez pas à me faire parvenir par mes collègues. So, hello everybody, I'm very happy to be here from Toronto, even if the background is not showing that. And to talk about Binogi and the research we did, the pilot research we did last year and the research that we are doing at the moment. So I would like you to think about that, to imagine that. So Sophia, she's a student who has just arrived in a suburb of Toronto from Syria. She's now in a literacy enrichment academic program at a nearby school, and she feels very frustrated that she's not able to understand what is being taught in class. And although she was always considered a good student in Syria, she now feels like she does not get a fair chance to show it. Why did I imagine this situation? I imagined this situation because there is, in fact, a report from UNESCO from 2016 that estimated that 40% of students are schooled in a language that they do not understand. And that is a topic that is very dear to me, not only because it is the topic of my research, but also because it happened to my own children. So many countries are experiencing an influx of newcomer students originating from all over the globe. And in Canada, we know that, especially in Toronto, where I live. And welcoming students who do not speak the school language, known as language learners, but actually I do not like these language learners tag. I think they are multilingual speakers, presents significant challenges for teachers, of course, for the language learners themselves, as I showed, but also for school boards and governments. Scenarios such as the one I presented about Sofia are in fact the consequence of many factors. And one of these factors could be the inaccurate assessments of the true academic potential of the students. We don't know how to assess exactly what they already know. We concentrate on what they don't know, the language of schooling, for instance, but we are not able to scaffold on what they already know. Which and the consequences of that may be that we curtail the academic opportunities offered to them. And ultimately, it's important to realize that twice as many students, language learners, are dropping out of school than as fluent speakers of the school language. Twice as many. It is an incredible percentage, and that shouldn't be. So that is one. And the second that we need to realize is that language learners are in fact underrepresented in the scientific pathways, which is not logical, which is not normal. We need to do something about that. Oh, sorry. I will de-share and share again. Share screen. So, oh, what's happening? So, like my colleagues were saying, are at the moment doing research, and I would like to mention that this research is made possible by a grant from the Social Science and Humanities Research Council in Canada. I have the honor of being the principal investigator and main applicant on this research, but I am of course supported by fantastic colleagues of mine, Antoinette Gagné, Carole Fleuret, Jérémy Sauvage, Nathalie Auger, and Mary Reid, Paula Christensen, Sohee Kang as collaborators from the universities of Toronto, Ottawa, New Brunswick, and Montpellier. I would also like to mention our partnership with the New Brunswick Department of Education and Early Childhood Development, and also with the Conseil des écoles publiques de l'Est de l'Ontario. And we are waiting for you to join. So I was talking about the challenges, challenges of the learners. So the challenges of the learner, we think that we know what they are. Gary was talking about the gap analysis, and this is exactly what we need to do. But to do that, we need to know what is at stake. So the challenges for learners is in fact the simultaneous acquisition of the academic content and of the school language and literacy in that language, being able to read and learn in that language, but also to interpret the world in that language, to understand what the world is telling us in that language. And in fact, how do you want to understand the academic content if you don't understand the school language, like in my example with Sophia? But there are also challenges for teachers, and we don't talk enough about those. Those challenges may be different, that they be second language teachers or mainstream teachers. So what we heard last year, for instance, from second language teachers was that, okay, I know how to teach these kids, but I don't know how to teach math. This is not what I do. While other would say, I don't know how to teach academic content, but I don't know how to teach language learners. So you see, different challenges depending on where you are and who you are in this process. But a general fact, which should worry us all, is that in the general population, there is in fact a decline of interest in STEM in the middle grades, as well as reduced practice opportunities to practice outside of school hours, to practice STEM outside of school hours. So you see 4 problems. Learners, they need to learn the language, and at the same time, they need to learn the academic content. Teachers, they need to get the specific strategies to teach these learners. And there are not enough resources for students to practice outside of classroom hours in STEM. And there is a steep decline of interest in STEM in the middle grades. Those are exactly the reason why we started to do research in collaboration with Binogi. Because what is in fact Binogi? Binogi is a platform that is trying to bridge these gaps, to bridge the learning gaps by supporting teachers and students with digital technology. And we know now how important it is now that we have gone through this pandemic. So, vraiment combler les écarts d'apprentissage en soutenant les enseignants et leurs élèves grâce à la technologie numérique. So that's one. And the second that they are trying to do, the second aspect that they are trying to address is the multilingual pedagogies. How can we use multilingual pedagogy to support science, technology, engineering, and mathematics in learning? So two aspects that are both extremely important. So here you see a picture of the pilot we did last year in a school in Toronto with many students with a refugee background. And you see at the moment they were using Binogi all together. And I would like to tell you a word about this research. So it really, in a nutshell, really fast, we observed, it was a pilot. A pilot, the definition of a pilot is that it is short, we make observations, and from these observations, we decide on the research questions we will have for the research, the real research, the one that I was talking to you about and that is now financed by the SSHRC. So we concentrated on the children, on the parents, and on the teachers. So actually we had very little contact with the parents, what we will try to do more in the next research. But so we asked these actors of education, what do you think of this platform? To which extent is it supporting you in your role? And so the children, the students, they were extremely enthusiastic. First, they saw Binogi as a game. They said they felt more invested because they had the feeling that they were playing with Binogi. They were playing with knowledge. They were earning points. They also really appreciated the fact that they could change the languages, but also that they were more responsible of their own learning. So they could decide whether they wanted to see the video, for instance, twice or 3 times, or whether they wanted to read under the video or to listen to the movie or to slow down the speech or to accelerate the speech. So lots of freedom, in fact. They also really underlined the fact that through Binogi and through the multilingual approach, they were able to understand better and more, like this student is saying, I understand more. And this one is saying, and this is very powerful, he said, or she said, what I learned with Binogi is math, because at first I didn't get it. So in fact, they reaffirmed what we already thought, that Binogi is facilitating access to content knowledge. So when we asked the parents, when we presented, in fact, we presented the platform to the parents, they also were extremely enthusiastic. I will always remember of a mother who came to me and who said, you know, I speak Arabic, but my child does not speak Arabic. And I said, oh, but you know what, that's great, because you can watch the lesson in Arabic and maybe you can talk about it with your child afterwards. And her face just like changed totally. She was so happy. She said, oh, wow, that's great. You know, all of a sudden she was telling me, I have access to the content too. I know what they are doing at school and I'll be able to support my child too. And then we, of course, asked the teachers what they thought about the platform. And, you know, like, think about the pandemic. In the pandemic, what we saw in learners is that some learners, in fact, learned even more during the pandemic. They learned other competencies that they wouldn't get at school, how to organize their day, how to concentrate, how to skip on things that are less important, etc., etc. Well, normally at school, this is organized for them. But what we also saw is that some children got really lost during the pandemic, like Gary was saying. So very different profiles. And in fact, in the teachers, it's exactly the same. Some teachers were already extremely flexible and already implemented web-based platforms in their teaching. But others, and many, in fact, many teachers didn't know what to do. In fact, teachers are really isolated when teaching language learners. We tell them, okay, here you have the curriculum, you have the books, you have the students, good luck, you know? And okay, I'm exaggerating a bit. In fact, what we say with Binogi, we say, oh, but we also have a good tool to support you, a co-teaching tool. But what we discovered is that all of that is not sufficient. So the main question we have for this research is really, how can teachers accelerate student acquisition of STEM knowledge and competencies? And the more specific question we have are, how can a web-based platform help teachers support each of their students? Gustav was insisting on this differentiated approach that is possible through a web-based platform. And this is exactly what we are looking at. And that's all about equity and inclusivity. And what kind of support, so that's the second sub-question, what kind of support do teachers need to use technology, to use Binogi? So in fact, what we know is that, of course, better if you learn in a language you understand. And in fact, we already say that. So that was a picture that I took on the you know, that was a picture that I took in a school, and I was so happy to take that picture, because we encourage the children, because we know that if they can read in their own language, in fact, they won't have to relearn to read. They can just transfer the knowledge they have in one language to the other. They don't need to relearn to. So we need to scaffold on what the students already know. And we know, of course, that if a student cannot understand what is being said in class, then it may be extremely difficult to move beyond the language to master content and skills, no matter how gifted the students may actually be. I just wanted to show you that very quickly. About the students who participated to our research. So we categorized the students into three main groups in accordance with their exposure to English. So in the first green plot, you see those children who were exposed to English since birth. In the second, you see children who were exposed to English from the very first day they went to school. And the third plot represents the children who were exposed to English later in life when they arrived in Canada. And what you see when you compare these groups with their use of Binogi, you see the more languages they have in their repertoire and the more time they spent on the platform. So you remember this equity component of our research, how to address the needs of each child in a differentiated way. Alors, les étapes de la recherche, the steps of the research. Here, I love that picture because I really wanted to show that every research that we do it with teachers. Teachers are the knowledge generators. We need them to create what we are creating, to invent new pedagogies. So the steps, so that's really something that we do. You know, when we do research, we need the teachers on board. We are all equally important, and we work together to develop our tools. So the first step is, of course, the alignment of the textbook content with the Binogi content, what Binogi is already doing very intensely, but we know that curricula are changing all the time. For instance, in Ontario, they just announced yesterday the content of the new curriculum for next year. And we organize a remedial, together with Binogi, remedial resources that you will be offered. And then we develop this, we will develop this online pedagogical tool in order to help you to profile each student's content needs. So not for the whole classroom, but that you can see for each student what are their needs in order to catch up, in order to with the content. So it's really a differentiated approach that is facilitated by the use of the phone application Catherine was talking about earlier today. And then we'll measure, of course, and that's what researchers do. They measure the impact of the resource by analyzing the use and the satisfaction of you, the teachers, school boards, etc., students, and of course of the parents. We too often don't know how to engage parents in education, and Binogi, we believe that Binogi should be a way to involve the parents more in education. So, bienvenue, welcome, benvenuti, rejoignez-nous. Join us for this research. Of course, you can contact the people from Binogi, but if you are interested, you can also contact me, and I'll be happy to answer your question. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you so much to all of you. I saw Gary's audio was connecting. I didn't know if there was something that you wanted to say towards the end of this. I think the question and answer. So if anybody has any questions currently, you can feel free to add those into the Q&A or into the chat box. We're looking at those now. I know Gustav was going through and answering those questions as they were coming up. So I'm just going to look at those, and I'll read the question and answer what Gustav said, or if Gustav, you want to answer live, just in case not everybody could see your answers in the Q&A. So the first question was, will Benogi eventually include early years? So Gustav, did you want to answer that question? I know you've already typed in the answer, but.
Yeah, but I could answer it. So since we are in love with helping every student in the world, we obviously want to help lower ages as well, but it takes a lot of time to animate this many videos. So, and we are working ourselves down in ages and not up. So in due time, we will reach those ages as well, but it's very hard to say how long time that will take. But it's also good to mention that since we are trying to explain things in as easy ways as possible, I think you can already use a lot of the videos for those ages as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I've navigated the Binogi site and looked at those content, and I would encourage everyone to go and look at it no matter what grade you teach, because to your point, Gustav, there are videos there that could be very much suitable for younger ages. And it does take time, obviously, for creation of the videos and making sure that it's a valuable video and not just more content for the sake of making more content. So I would encourage everyone to go look, no matter what grade level you're currently teaching, to see what is offered, and you might be pleasantly surprised as to what's there. And then there was a question about the pilot program. So did I see an opportunity to be part of a pilot program for 6 to 9 teachers? I don't know if Gustav or Catherine, if you want to talk about the pilot program that was mentioned.
There's definitely an opportunity to engage with us, and if anyone is interested in being part of a pilot project with us, we would be more than happy to provide additional information. Today was a very quick overview, but we would be very happy and eager to welcome that conversation. So absolutely, please reach out. Any one of us at the Halifax office would be very happy to support you. And I know Emmanuelle has also extended her email address. So feel free to reach out and contact us.
That's fantastic. And it would be a great opportunity to be part of this research and this pilot program to see how Binogi fits within the New Brunswick schools or Nova Scotia, wherever our listeners are, to be part of that program. And I encourage everyone. I do a shameless plug for the podcast, but I had Catherine on my Creative Classroom podcast, and we dove into some of this pilot programs and what Binogi offers and really where it came from. So you can head over to any major streaming service or at My Creative Pod to listen to our chat about Binogi and where it came from and the work in Toronto with it as well, to know more about the pilot program. So I'll open the floor to our panelists for maybe one final statement. There are no more questions in our Q&A or in the chat field. So I'll open the floor just one more time to see if there's anything that either of you would like to say before we head out.
Brian, I'd like to say thank you to you and the summit for hosting us today. It was a great opportunity to both to engage with our own colleagues on the panel and with your audience, and we look forward to future collaborations in the region.
Absolutely. And it was great to have all of you here to talk about Binogi, which is a fantastic product. And I know here in Anglophone East in our school district, we have been looking at the product, and we've met several times actually to talk about how we can implement the service really into our schools and whether we're in person or at home. So I thank you all for taking the time to join us and present what your product is, your service, and how you've designed it to really support our teachers and our students. And we look forward to hearing more. And next year at the summit, hopefully we'll be in person, and we can have all of you there and be part of that session as well. So on behalf of the Atlantic Education Summit, I thank you all so much for joining us as attendees and participants in today's session. This has been recorded, so you can certainly go watch it again. It'll be up on YouTube as well as the Connected Dash Community website if you wish to rewatch or share it with your colleagues. And be sure to check out our sessions tomorrow with our keynote speakers and the Cross Canada panel as well. So on behalf of the Education Summit, I thank all of you from Binogi for joining us during the summit, and to all of our participants for being here. Have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.